Howdy folks, welcome back to No Guarantees. Today we're going to be addressing the single biggest issue that I still have with my YJ after daily driving it and working on it for the last 2 years.
Oh, the rust.
No, I've already taken care of that.
They ride like a log cart?
No, I've already taken care of that.
They're ugly.
No.
They're uncomfortable?
Well, kinda.
If it wasn't for Jurassic Park, nobody would like them?
Hey, today I'm going to see if I can address making this thing a little quieter. And I know it's a Jeep, it's supposed to be uncomfortable, whatever. This is my daily driver, and I'd like for it to be at least a little bit quieter, so when I'm going 60 miles an hour down the highway, me and who's ever in my passenger seat don't have to yell at each other. I've already done a couple things to try to make this thing quieter, the most obvious of which I'll go through first, and then we'll get started with some of the new stuff. So the biggest thing I did to quiet this thing down, I did a while back. I got this hardtop for free off of a parts Jeep that I had, and I painted it to match the color scheme of the Jeep, and ever since then, it's made a tremendous difference on sound. It used to be with the soft top, as soon as I started going fast, because of how worn out it would start flapping in the breeze and you could not hear anything. So now that I've got the hardtop on there, it makes a big difference. Granted, I do still have soft uppers. These are the Jeep TJ uppers. A very common modification in YJs is if you take the TJ upper and you cut the rear pin off right here and just re-weld it on at a different angle, it lines up perfectly with the YJ door and it fits the hardtop opening around the top. Two other very simple modifications I've made to the interior is I put this piece of weather stripping around the outside of the door jambs and some of this HVAC duct putty in the corner. And between that and this, it's a very close fit between the TJ upper and the hardtop, but it's definitely not perfect. So between the insulation and the duct putty, it makes them match up very well. I've also put some in the corner down in here and along the bottom of the TJ upper on top of the door to try to fill that gap as well. Another thing that makes a big difference in your interior, and we're going to test this today, is having a carpet, even if it's just a factory carpet. I took my carpet out not too long ago to clean it and ended up driving it around for a couple of days with no carpet in it, and you could tell how much louder it was without having a carpet inside. The next thing that I've already done, I did it one of the nights this week after work, was I put some sound deadening inside the hood. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this on camera, but you can hear how much this vibrates more. I'll put up the tripod here in a second and show you what I've done under here. To be honest, underneath the hood doesn't make a tremendous difference inside the vehicle because all that sound is still traveling through the firewall, which hopefully we're going to be able to remedy today. But it does make a big difference when you're standing outside of the vehicle. For example, if you have it idling and you're walking around it like this, you can hear a noticeable difference in how loud it is. Here is what I've done to the inside of the hood. I'll put a link to the insulation that I chose from Amazon. It rolled on very easily. I just cut it out with a pair of scissors. You can do it much neater than I did. Obviously, I've got some jagged edges and things like that. But it does make a difference as far as the sound outside of the Jeep. And I'm hoping once I go ahead and do the firewall here, it'll do a much better job of keeping all the engine noises and engine sounds into the engine bay. I did also go through here and do some just very basic maintenance. Spark plugs, spark plug wires, valve cover, transmission dipstick just for fun. I took a paint marker and I painted up all the letters on the top of the fuse blocks. I think I like how that looks. I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing to all of the other caps and such in the engine bay that have those same like plastic elevated letters. I also went through and did a serpentine belt as well as just painted a couple things up front here to make them look better. And then I also painted the jack mount. Anyways, back to the video. I'm gonna go run inside, get the products, show you guys what my plan is, and then we can go for a test drive. The first piece that I did was the underhood liner that I already showed you guys on the green Jeep. All I did for that was take the hood, flip it up onto the windshield. I cut the piece in half and put one half on one side, one half on the other side, and then I took some excess and put it down that strip in the middle. After I pressed on both halves, there were some overlaying edges in this area right here. So all I did was cut it off with a pair of scissors. You can even rip it with your hands if you want, and it was a pretty simple installation. I think it took me all of 15 minutes. Moving on to the inside of the Jeep, I've already talked about the carpet and hardtop helping out that situation. But now I've got two more boxes of stuff that's going all in the interior. Traditionally, if you're going for maximum insulation, there's 3 layers of things that you want to use. You'd want to use some butyl rubber, which is essentially this stuff. If I can open it. This is some 80 mil kill mat. It comes in these sheets that are, I don't know, maybe 1 foot by 2 foot, something like that. Comes in a bunch of these sheets. You stick them down on the floor. That is your first layer that you put down. Your second layer, I opted to not include because it's expensive. You buy some MLV, mass layered vinyl, and that is a very thick, very dense substance that people even prefer the heavier stuff. They'll buy it in terms of pounds per square foot to try to get it as thick and as heavy as possible. You put that on top of this stuff. The goal of this stuff is really to keep out a lot of the heat and a lot of the road noise. The goal of the mass layered vinyl that you put on top of it is really to provide an entire shield of all kinds of noises. This stuff also does a very good job of keeping out the heat, from what I've heard. The mass layered vinyl, not so much, but it does a very good job of keeping out and of containing all of the louder and more common noises to the outside of the vehicle. The poor man's version is this, which is some simple closed cell foam. Traditionally, like I said, for maximum insulation, you put that on the bottom, the mass layered vinyl in the middle, and then this stuff on top. This stuff, in addition to making the inside of the car more comfortable, it's kind of squishy, as you can see. In addition to making the inside of the car more comfortable as something that sits underneath the carpet, it also does a very good job at trapping higher frequency sounds. So for example, on these Jeeps, you're ending up with a lot of wind noise, and a lot of people get gaps on these things like this. A gap up in here, small gap around there, maybe a small gap in the corner, and those gaps can become whistling sounds. And this closed cell foam does a good job of trapping those whistling sounds. So together, between these two things, I think I'll be able to make a noticeable difference in how loud the interior of the Jeep is. The other thing that I did not mention that you'll want to purchase is one of these rollers. I think they're about 10 bucks, and they make the application a lot simpler. The way it's going to work, and I'll show you when I get in the car, is you start rolling this, and while you're rolling it, once these ridges go away, that means you've applied the roller enough. You've pressed it down enough into the vehicle. One other thing that I just thought of, and I'll show you guys on this Jeep to show you how they originally come. This one also has the same TJ uppers that I talked about being on the green Jeep. These zippers are extremely loud. This, at 75 miles an hour, is very annoying. So what I've done on the green Jeep that probably made the biggest difference, at least as far as my sanity when driving this thing down the highway, all I did was go to Harbor Freight, buy some cheap paracord, tied it around itself, burnt the edges off with a lighter, and these make no sound. It made a huge difference in terms of internal ride quality inside of this Jeep. So now I'm gonna go ahead, grab my insulation materials, and we can get to putting them inside the Jeep after we go for a test drive. So here is a quick video clip of it at idle. It's actually fairly quiet inside the car. I just had my app up to figure out what the decibel reading was. I'm using Decibel X, which is an app you can get on the Apple App Store. And it's about 64, a max of 64 decibels with like an average of 63. So relatively speaking, that's pretty quiet, especially compared to what we're gonna have when we're actually going down the highway. This is 40 miles an hour on relatively flat road. We're going 75, 76 decibels. Next, I'm gonna bring it up to 50 and we can get a test there. Here's 50 miles an hour, which is about 82 decibels. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and pull all of the carpet out of the interior. Here is the idle again, this time with no carpet. I did end up leaving these side rails on down here, just because they're a real pain to take off, especially with the seat belt and with the doors on. This is roughly 63, 64 decibels. Now we can go for a drive and get our measurements at speed with no carpet. Here is 40 miles an hour. We're looking at roughly 79 or 80 decibels. Here's 50 miles an hour with no carpet on the interior. We're looking at roughly somewhere between 82 and 84 decibels. Here is
about 20 miles an hour. We're looking at roughly 74 or 75 decibels.
Alrighty, well here is as far as I got. Firewall's covered, floor pans are covered, both sides. The whole middle in the center, underneath both seats. But when I come around the rear, you take a look at this and you think, it looks like you ran out. Well, you'd be completely correct. I did run out. I got to back here and I started counting up my sheets. And I realized I only had like 5 more. So I went 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I took the last one and I just cut it all up and tried to cover as much ground as possible. I even got these little dinky strips back here. They'll probably do a whole lot of nothing.
Here is 20 or so miles an hour, and we're looking at about just over 70 decibels, 71, 72. This is about 40 miles an hour, and we're looking at roughly 76 or 77 decibels. Here is 50 miles an hour, and we're looking at 78 or 79 decibels.
This stuff is the closed cell foam. You can see I was using it as my cutting board for doing the last section of stuff. I'm gonna do a similar path of what I did with the last one, with doing the stuff in the front, and then whatever I have extra, I might put in the back. So here's my first piece. All I did was lay it in there, cut it, pull the backing off, stick it down. Got the same roller that I was using on the other stuff. Just roll it down and really make sure that connection is good between the multiple layers. I'm gonna go ahead and do this everywhere I can or everywhere I feel like, and then I'll get back with you guys. All right, so here is roughly what 36 square feet of this foam will get you. I've got tire floor pans and trans tunnel on both sides, some up against the firewall, but I did not go as far up as I did with the butyl rubber stuff. You can see coming through in places where I didn't get this stuff all the way up, but I did go with the butyl rubber. Moving around to the back. Unlike with the butyl rubber, I thought it would be nice to have much larger spaces covered with this, where passengers are gonna be. So I put a big mat of it in the front, and I also lined the entire wheel wells, besides that little corner. But I lined both wheel wells on both sides because I feel like that's where a lot of the noise is going to be coming from. Something I considered with this piece is the exhaust in these Jeeps runs right through here. So I did consider cutting this piece in half and putting it vertically right on top of the exhaust. But I think I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm not going to be buying more of either of these materials because I believe somebody's going to be coming over the weekend to buy this. And once I sell it, I will be making a video on what I did to it, how much money I put into it, and how much I made selling it, if any. We'll see what price it ends up being, but I think I'm set to make some money. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and take a drive around like this with no carpet, get some decibel readings, 20, 40, and 50, and then I'm going to throw the carpet and the entire interior back in it, take another video with that at the same miles per hour, and then I'll make a quick conclusion video, and I'll send you guys on your way.
Here is 20 miles an hour. We're at roughly 67, 68 decibels. Now I'll hop on the road and do 40 and 50. Here is 40 miles an hour. We're at 77 to 79 decibels, somewhere in that range. It is worth mentioning that it's windier now than it was before, and anytime you have a headwind, especially in a car that's shaped like a brick, it's going to make a difference, and it's going to make a lot of wind noise regardless, just because of the shape of the car. There's a word for it, but it's not, I can't think of it right now. But basically the way this cuts through the wind is not good. So yeah, 77 to 79 decibels with a little bit more wind. I can hear it coming from the corners on both sides. So I was hoping to keep consistent conditions the whole way through, but unfortunately I don't think I'm that lucky. I'm going to go turn around and then we can do 50 miles an hour. Here is 50 miles an hour, and we're looking at about 78 decibels, which I think was right in the same range that I was at 40 miles an hour. So I think the case is when I'm headed that way, I'm going into the wind, and now I'm headed away from the wind at 50. So if it's 10 miles an hour wind at 40 miles an hour, that's really like you're going 50 miles an hour.
Something to consider if you're doing this in a car that's not a Jeep. I didn't put any insulation in the door panels because half the time I have the doors off. Same thing with the hardtop. I've got no insulation up there, and this makes its fair share of noise as well. It's just fiberglass. So if this is a rig where you're keeping your doors and your top on pretty much all the time, I would recommend doing the same treatment inside the doors and at least inside the top of the hardtop. But if you're like me and this stuff comes off relatively often, I decided that it wasn't worth it. Another thing to consider on these Jeeps especially is your seals. I, for one, have wind noise that comes out of this gap right here between the hardtop and the windshield frame. That's because the seal that sits underneath the lip of my hardtop is worn out. The seal that sits right up in here. And there's also a seal that runs along that back frame rail right there, the top of the body, between the hardtop and the body. Those wear out as well, or some people, like me, don't have one. So if you're still experiencing more noise than you're comfortable with, even after you give your car this entire treatment, it's definitely worth considering replacing or installing seals in those locations. Another seal or another area that can cause wind noise as well as water is your cowl vent. There's a flap in there that basically lets in air from the outside or doesn't. If the seal on that flap isn't sealing well, you can get some air noise coming in there. Same thing with your seal at the bottom of the windshield frame, as well as your windshield frame seal itself. Those are all definitely areas that are worth considering if you're trying to make your Jeep as quiet as possible. But like a lot of people have said when I've been doing this whole process and talking to people about it is a Jeep. So it's never going to be a Cadillac or anything like that. It's still a loud tin can with four-wheel drive. Anyways, I'm going to put the carpet in and we can go for our last drive.
Here's 20 miles an hour. We're at roughly 66, 67 decibels. Here's 40 miles an hour going into the headwind. So this is roughly 76 or 77 decibels. Here is 50 miles an hour headed home. We're looking at about 77 decibels.
Hey folks, so it's been about 2 weeks since I last talked to you guys. I really wanted to make sure that I drove the Jeep with every single setup, from bare tub to double insulation with the carpet, because the numbers do tell a story, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but I thought it would be important to actually experience all the different levels of insulation so I could give my honest feedback about it. First, diving into the numbers, I'm only going to go over idle 20 mile an hour and 50 mile an hour. I'm immediately going to rule out 40 mile an hour just because the direction that I was going on that second day, I don't think it was conducive to making good data. First off, at idle, it was exactly the same for every layer of insulation. It really didn't matter. Everything from bare tub to double insulation with carpet, I could probably put 1,000,000 pounds of insulation in there and it wouldn't make a difference. That makes sense, right? Because there's no road noise, there's not really any exhaust noise, there's no wind noise, it's just the engine idling, which is pretty quiet. It's really just the valve train making noise and that's about it. So I think 20 miles an hour is where we saw our most effective difference. And to be honest, to extrapolate a little bit from driving it around, anything from idle to right off idle up to 45 miles an hour or so. It made a tremendous difference. I'm going to go ahead right now and I'll play all of those clips back to back. But from actually driving around the Jeep, it tells a very similar story. That in that mile an hour range, like I said, from 0 to 50, the predominant noise is not really the wind yet. It gets close up towards 50, but under that, it's the engine, it's the exhaust, it's the road. And that's really where this insulation stuff shines, especially the butyl rubber. There was a significant difference going from a bare tub to carpet, going from carpet to carpet and butyl rubber, and then not a very big difference going from that setup and putting the closed cell foam on top of it. And at 50 miles an hour, we saw a very similar case. Going from bare tub to double insulation, it did get better every time, but adding the closed cell foam on top at the end did not really make a significant difference. It's definitely there, and if you're someone who's going after all-out quietness, it would make a difference, a very small difference. But if your Jeep is just a vehicle where you want to drive it around and just enjoy it a little bit more and be able to talk to your passengers and listen to the radio and all the reasons that you would do something like this, I don't think it's necessary. Maybe if your Jeep seals up better than mine, if you have better seals, if your doors fit better, then it might make a much bigger difference. But for the regular 30-year-old Jeep, I don't think it matters. So to segue into our next section, I guess more officially, what would I do again, or what will I do again when I go to put this all in the red Jeep? So I think obviously I'm going to go ahead and get another set of butyl rubber. I think for 50 bucks, 60 if you want to include the roller, it made a significant difference in the comfort and the internal ride quality of the Jeep. Now the closed cell foam and the underhood liner, on the other hand, I would not recommend unless, like I said, you're really trying to make it as quiet as possible, especially the underhood liner. The underhood liner does make a difference when you're outside of the Jeep and when you're walking around, like I said, but how often are you idling your Jeep and walking around and going, oh man, I really wish it was quieter? No, that never happens. So it looks better, I guess, than having like a dirty underneath of your hood because it's shiny and like space age, but honestly, I would not worry about it. The closed cell foam does make a difference, and the data and my ears back that up, and it does make sense that it would make a small difference. But when you're dealing with as much wind noise and wind rushing around that square windshield frame as we are in these Jeeps, it's honestly just not worth it. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope this wasn't a waste of your time. I know I definitely learned something, and when I go ahead to putting the red Jeep together and actually trying to make that a comfortable daily driver, this is the exact same philosophy that I'm going to follow. Eventually, when I do go ahead and do that one, I'm going to take it a step further, and I am going to line the sides of the tub, which we skipped on the green one, and I'm also going to line the inside of the hardtop. I've seen a lot of videos with people with JKs, JLs, Gladiators even, a lot of the newer Jeeps, people put in, I think Hotheads is the brand, headliners, and from my interpretation, it's just some foam wrapped in fabric, and you don't need to spend $500-600 on a headliner. So I'm gonna try to make one, probably out of some like insulation style foam board and some carpet that I'm sure I could get from Michael's or Joann's or whatever. I think that's gonna be way cheaper, it'll probably look better, it'll be more unique, and I think it'll serve pretty much the same purpose. But that's not gonna be for a while down the road. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on No Guarantees.